Thanks, Mark. I'm really happy to be here. And with that, I'm actually going to flip it over to Cam, who's actually the reason that we're all here. So, Cam, as a community organizer, you're a lawyer, you're an environmental activist, you're an entrepreneur, you're an accountant, a professor. You've done a lot of work towards environmental solutions for the last 30 years. Now you've got an active Aboriginal and environmental law practice, and you teach it. So why are you now stepping away from that?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in my life, as there always has been. Busy, busy, busy. But well, maybe the best way, Anna, actually, is for me to tell you a story. So 3 decades ago, almost, I started grappling with environmental issues, and I was here in British Columbia. And the biggest environmental issue at the time in BC was clear cutting in forests, and it was a completely polarized debate. On the one hand was we have to clear cut because that's going to create jobs. And on the other hand was, well, we need to protect the forest. And there were just these two positions, completely separate options. There were two options and that was it. And I remember the day when the light went off in my head and I realized that in fact that's a false choice. It's a false choice between clear cutting on the one hand and protecting forests on the other hand. And I met people that had figured out a way to protect forests as the top priority and create jobs. So you take clear cutting out of the equation. It's not about that. It's about a solution that has to do with creating more jobs. And in fact, as we learn more about it, the jobs that are created are better. There's opportunities for people in the community to use the wood to make manufacturing and value-added production in that community. So there's more spin-off jobs. And we learned more about the forests themselves to figure out how to do ecoforestry. So the forests are better off, the jobs are better off. And these solutions happen by bringing people together. I can recall standing in a forest with someone from Greenpeace and with a logger and having them agree on what should happen in the forest. That was an amazing moment. This was what it was all about. These are creating solutions. And these answers, these solutions don't happen unless you bring people together. So I'm running now, to answer your question more directly, I'm running to be leader of the Green Party to continue to do that work, to continue to bring people together, to find these innovative solutions that we can all embrace, especially as we move forward into a zero carbon future.
So can you talk a little bit more about how specifically your experience bringing people together would translate into your role and what you would do as leader of the Green Party?
Sure. Well, it's been just over a week, almost 10 days since we launched this campaign. And during that time, my team and I have been talking to a lot of people around the province, listening to what their concerns are, listening to what their questions are, their hopes, their ideas about the Green Party and about the future of the province. And it's really helped me understand again that bringing people together can respond to these concerns and work through these issues to create solutions. So for example, I spoke with a guy here in the Lower Mainland, actually, of Vancouver, who is a green entrepreneur, has green technology and innovation ideas, and is in the process of putting together a plant. He wants to build a plant to manufacture, and he wants to employ Indigenous people in particular. So Indigenous people would be working there, they'd be involved in the plant, it would be this kind of technology that we need for a zero carbon future. And he's been talking to the government, trying to talk to the government. We have an innovation department in the provincial government. He's been trying to reach them. They don't phone him back. They don't respond to him. And now he's frustrated and feeling like, well, if I'm going to build this plant, maybe I have to do this outside of British Columbia. And that's horrible to hear. That's exactly what we don't want to have happen. We need people like this person and his team and his ideas to bring people together, innovators, Indigenous people, come up with these solutions and have them happen right in BC. So we need the good ideas that are here, and we need to help them step forward with solutions, not close the door on those opportunities. So again, bringing people together to create these answers is what I would focus on as leader of the Green Party.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I think that's especially important now in COVID times. And if we rest on that for a moment, what do you think are the major lessons that are coming out of this current crisis? And what do you think that the Green Party could offer in response to that under your leadership?
Well, so yeah, great question about COVID. There's at least two lessons have come out of COVID for me that are particularly important. The first has to do with our relationship with nature. COVID, the virus happened because we're intruding on nature. It makes the leap from animals to humans, and there's thousands more of these zoonotic viruses waiting to make the leap. We've got to stop abusing nature and getting in that situation. The virus itself is exacerbated by the way we treat the planet, in particular air pollution. So bad air quality leads people to a situation where they're more vulnerable to COVID. Their symptoms are going to be worse when they get COVID. And the virus itself can transport over longer distance because of the air pollution. So air pollution exacerbates it, but at the same time where jurisdictions around the world are lessening the regulations around coal production, burning coal, for example, exactly the wrong thing to do. And on the other hand, about our relationship with nature, is that I'm in the process of co-authoring a book that has to do with our relationship with nature and all the benefits that happen if we have access to nature on a regular basis. You know, there's incredible benefits. Physiologically, people live longer, they're healthier, they resist disease, they recover faster. The psychological benefits of emotional well-being and happiness and creativity and productivity in employees and children who play in nature. They adopt play that's based on creativity and imagination, not just physical prowess and domination. So there's all these amazing benefits of restoring our relationship with nature, and COVID has brought that to the forefront. The other lesson that's obvious, I think, about COVID is that it's been incredible how quickly things change, how quickly we've responded. Who would have thought that the workplace would change so quickly? Who would have thought that we'd be having this meeting over Zoom and I'm wearing these earbuds and we're just meeting each other at a distance? But things change really, really quickly. And so when we apply that quick thinking, you know, we can actually respond to problems quickly. We apply that to all the other problems that we're facing, be it climate change and so on. We can actually do something now. We don't have to wait forever. We can't be stuck in the previous system. We can adapt very quickly, and COVID has taught that to us.
So let's talk about, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty optimistic, which is great, but I think, you know, COVID's also left a lot of people feeling uncertain. You know, they're worried that we're going to be facing unprecedented debt and economic disruption. People are worried about how they're going to make their rent, you know, how we're going to take care of the elderly. And on top of that, you know, the push to this transition to a green economy is also leaving a lot of workers in sunset industries, you know, really worried about their livelihoods. So can you tell us more about what would be your plan for jobs and for getting the economy working in a way that works for everyone?
Sure. Well, you say I sound optimistic, and I am optimistic because we've shown that we can respond quickly and we can do this. My plan for the economy at this point in time where we're moving forward is that we can't expect the economy is going to go back to the way it was before. There was a time a few decades ago when the economy worked in a certain way and it worked okay for some people, sacrificing the environment, sacrificing jobs that are going to be stable for the long term. And some people think, well, we're just going to go back to that. We're going to retreat and hope that things are the way they were before. But increasingly, people are recognizing, and this has to be the case, that we're not going to go back to that. We're going to leap forward. And if BC isn't at the forefront of doing that, another jurisdiction will be. We'll be left in the dust. So our opportunity in BC is to recognize that fact, recognize what's really going on in the world today, to bring people together, as I've discussed, create these solutions, and be at the forefront of what's happening around the world. The world's transitioning away from fossil fuels. Everybody knows that. So why are we building LNG? We should be instead doing this innovative stuff that I talked to that person I mentioned earlier about, green technology in BC. They're going to create jobs that aren't just for this particular election cycle or just for the very short term, but create jobs that last, because we're at the forefront of what's happening in the world. We aren't lagging behind. We're at the cutting edge, which is where we should be. This province is filled with brilliant, energetic, creative people who can lead that, and all we have to do is support them, bring them together, support these ideas, and we'll be at the forefront of this just and nature-led transition to a zero-carbon future.
That's all really fantastic, very exciting. You know, you talked about a just and nature-led transition, and that phrase, not just a green economy, but a just economy. So what does that mean to you? Having a just economy, a just society. What are some of the fundamental assumptions that we need to be rethinking?
Well, one thing about COVID in terms of this is that we're all weathering this storm, but we're in different boats. The people who were most vulnerable before COVID have had the greatest challenges because of COVID. The inequities are exacerbated. Some people are able to weather the storm and be more resilient. Others just don't have the resources to do that. And COVID has, I think, highlighted the inequities that were there to begin with, but made situations worse for a lot of people. And the Green Party has a very strong position on this that I fully embrace, about equity, about ensuring that everyone can participate and recover. And part of this is having, for example, a universal basic income, so that when people face difficult times, they're able to get back on their feet quickly. They don't have to worry about the minimum requirements of life for a place to live and food to eat and so on. And then they're all of a sudden able to participate, and they're going to be the ones that are leading things that next time we turn around. So that universal basic income is really important. We're all, of course, aware of real estate in British Columbia. We talk about it all the time, and to me, it's just a staggering presumption that some young person is going to be able to somehow come up with a down payment to buy a house that's $2.5 million. That just doesn't make any sense. So instead, what we need are different ownership structures. So different ways of allowing people to participate without having to go at this old model where you have to own it all yourself. There could be shared ownership structures. That works in housing. There's lots of great options for housing. And it also works for businesses. There's different ways that businesses can be owned by people in communities, by workers in the community, so that the innovation and the entrepreneurs that I mentioned earlier are part of the show, but not the whole show. Everyone has a role to participate. This is, in my mind, particularly important with Indigenous people. Indigenous people should be leading the charge in trying to get these environmental innovative solutions going and be involved in shared ownership and entrepreneurial and leadership positions in the future. So there's lots of ways that I think we can address equity now with these sorts of structures that next time we face difficult situations, we're all able, a little better supported to weather storms.
So you touched on a lot of themes to do with economic justice there. But turning also to social justice, to racial justice, we've seen the killing of George Floyd and the focus on victims of police violence, especially in the U.S. But I think it's also led to a much-needed reckoning in Canada about the way that racism manifests itself in our society, and in particular with relation to Indigenous people. So in the face of this reckoning, what do you think the BC Greens will do?
Well, you mentioned Indigenous people again, which is, of course, in Canada at the forefront of thinking about racism and historic injustice and so on. I'm a lawyer, as you mentioned earlier, and common law lawyers are proud of the Magna Carta, for example, which is this ancient document that's been around for 800 years. Well, where we are here in British Columbia, there's been Indigenous legal systems for 8,000 years, longer. There were pre-existing legal systems and societies, and those legal systems didn't go away. What we can do is help support Indigenous people to articulate Indigenous law in their community in today's terms. It's not static. It's not that the law was set 8,000 years ago. It's the same now, just as the common law system evolves over time. Indigenous law needs a contemporary articulation. Support that happening so that Indigenous people have that articulation of Indigenous law as it currently stands. There's equality between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, and that'll serve as the basis for moving forward with meaningful reconciliation. The Green Party has a very strong platform, I agree with completely, of course, which has to do with meaningful reconciliation and equality. And that happens by recognizing the full extent of the society, so that there is meaningful equality there and full equality going forward. And that's gonna result in lasting resolution and lasting peace and lasting justice, and not by skirting the issues by imposing kind of only one side of it. So supporting Indigenous people in that way, and as I mentioned earlier, supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs and creativity at the forefront of our transition. You also mentioned George Floyd, Anna, and one thing that's come out of that conversation in the United States and around the world is the role of police in communities. And I would, as leader, support the idea that there needs to be funding for community outreach, for people who are trained and professionals who can go into the community and be able to assist with poverty and with addiction and with racism and domestic violence, because that's what their profession is and that's what they're trained to do in a way that's most helpful for the community. And supporting the funding to have that happen would be a critical part of a Green Party approach.
Absolutely. Another part of this reckoning, of course, is that it's led to calls for more diversity among our leaders. So, would you be able to tell us, how do you think that your leadership would contribute to having more diverse voices at the table?
Sure. Well, I do what I've always done, of course, which is bringing people together. One of the important roles of a leader in conjunction with riding associations is to identify the top people in the province. And this would be a slate of candidates that are diverse geographically, professionally, women, Indigenous people, racial diversification, people from all walks of life across British Columbia that are the top in their area, that represents their communities, that can come forward and together create a strong slate of candidates for the next election. So I would very much support doing that. And another part of it is mentoring people along the way and giving people opportunities. We've been really blessed on this campaign, I think, with a host of people, young people, including yourself and others who have brought a lot to the campaign team, are leading roles in the campaign, and I think that sort of mentorship and opportunity for people to then take on more leadership roles in the future is a big part of what the Green Party can offer, certainly. And the piece too here about having a strong slate of candidates means that once the candidates run, there's a continual role for them. Once we elect more Greens, then they will take over leadership into the future. And that piece is, I think, incredibly important because it speaks to transition. It's not about me as an individual, it's about the team, it's about the group of diverse and strong candidates that we can attract to the Green Party.
That's fantastic. And with that, we wanted to move to, we're just about halfway through, so that works out well. We wanted to move to part 2 of our Zoom meeting today, which is viewer questions. So we'll start with, looking at the questions that people sent in advance. And then I also see questions coming in the chat. So we'll address those too. And depending on our time, if there's any that we don't address here, Cam is really happy, Cam, to chat with you all personally and have a phone call to discuss it further.
Yeah, absolutely on that. Well, I'll certainly do my best to respond to any emails or calls that I get to as quickly as possible to continue the conversation. I've been, I think, really lucky so far, hearing from many people already, both in phone calls and emails, asking questions and reaching out to the campaign, and that's a great part of doing this work, and I look forward to more questions from everybody.
Perfect. So with that, all right, first of all, we had Andrew in White Rock. Do you believe the Green Party under your leadership will have a viable chance to form government?
Yes. Yeah, Andrew, good question, and absolutely. Now, it might take more than a single election cycle, and so as I just mentioned, talking about attracting a very strong and diverse slate of candidates for this election, that's a step. We then succeed in having more seats in the legislature, maybe become official opposition. We build on that. Next election cycle, we have these people who have experience and are being mentored and are better known, and before we know it, we have a real chance, I think, of forming government. This is a party that is the future. British Columbia needs a party that's committed to the values that the Green Party brings, committed to this innovation, getting British Columbia in front of the challenges that the world face, respecting our relationships with each other and respecting our relationship with nature, and that resonates with people, and that's where we're going, and I'm glad that everybody in the call is joining me, because that's the future.
Excellent. Now, Andrew from White Rock had a follow-up question, which was, which riding would you run in if you became leader?
Another good question, Andrew. So I live in East Vancouver, and the Green Party has had great success on Vancouver Island. I think it's important we build on that and expand to other parts of the province. It would be important to have a leader of the province in the Lower Mainland, would be a good step. So I would look at a number of Vancouver ridings in Metro Vancouver where I'd look at. The decision would, of course, depend on a number of factors and the timing of the election and consideration of the incumbents in those various ridings and whether they want to run, of course, and the riding association. So we would consider all those factors together. But again, I think Metro Vancouver would be the place where it would be great to have a leader of the Green Party.
Fantastic. So Elsa from Vancouver asks, we know that whenever polled, British Columbians rank the environment as one of their top issues, yet the BC Greens consistently underperform in voter turnout relative to popular support. Why do you think that's been, and how will you fix that?
Well, okay, Elsa, that's a great question. So two thoughts on that. First is that it just takes time. I think it takes time, and everyone in the Green Party has worked really hard to bring the party to the place where it is, which is a great success story. And we now have an opportunity to move it further, to attract that slate of candidates I talked about, to put forward a platform and ideas about innovation and equity and health to really position BC as the leader in the world. And as this happens, people will realize that the Green Party has always had a full platform. There's this myth that it's a single party issue, but that's what it is. It's a myth. Green Party has had a full platform and continues to have a full platform about all the issues that are important to British Columbia. And as people realize the connections among those issues, people will, I think, see the importance of recognizing our relationship with nature, our relationship with each other as key to having a strong economy and a strong future. So yes, it's been historically, I think, unfortunate that the performance, Elsa, as you had, isn't as strong as you mentioned, isn't as strong as it could be. But going forward into the future, people will realize that this party really is where the province is going and where the future is. And we do have a full platform that covers all the issues.
And I think that actually relates really well to Sharon's cross question, turning to the chat here. So Sharon says that, perceptions are important. And I hear from people, mostly NDPers, that the Greens and the NDP are the same and they just vote. How do you propose to change that perception? And how will you attract disillusioned NDPers and other voters? And then I'll combine that with one more, which is Ashley from Vancouver, who wants to know, would you cooperate with the NDP as leader of the BC Greens?
So the Greens and the NDP are not the same party. They're absolutely not the same party. That's why I'm running for the Green Party leadership. We're a different party than the NDP. In 2017, the CASA agreement was the right thing to do at that time. Going forward, there'll be a different situation, a different set of circumstances. And as we put together the team that I've been mentioning, we're going to have a chance to really offer British Columbians something very different than what the other parties have to say. And when we do that, we'll be in a position to have more influence going forward. Now, we're open to cooperating with other elected members of the legislature, and that's fine. Issues come up and we can cooperate and create solutions together, but we are not the same as the NDP. We are the party that can offer something very different from the NDP, and I think we've shown that in the platforms. We've shown that as this campaign's been rolled out, and so in the future, the role of the Green Party will be different, and we will cooperate as we need to with other parties as we strengthen our role in the legislature and strengthen our influence over where this province is going.
A good segue into a question about other issues that are on the NDP's mind at the moment. And that is Mark from Delta, who asked, can you tell us about what your position is on Site C?
So completely opposed to the Site C, never would have done it. Now we're in a position where the Green Party needs to, of course, hold the NDP accountable for having moved forward with that project. The cost overruns that we're seeing happening aren't surprising. Of course there's cost overruns, and it isn't just because of COVID. And the costs of this project, though, aren't just in the construction costs. There's the cost of the Indigenous land that's being flooded, of the sacred burial grounds, of the loss of agricultural lands, and the lost opportunities are incredible. There were other green energy projects that could have, the innovation I was talking about earlier, the development of a really transformative nature-led innovation and industry movement towards a carbon-free future. That's what we should have embraced. And the money that we're spending, and now overspending, and the extra cost of Site C is money that could have been available, for example, for our children. The schools are now facing a situation with COVID that wasn't expected, but that money's been spent, unfortunately, on Site C instead.
I was on mute. I'm unmuted now. With that, I'm going to throw you over. I think Mark has a spotlight on a couple of the participants on this call who were keen to ask you their questions personally. Mark?
Sure.
Sure. Let's invite Sandra. Sandra, can you turn your video on and ask your question? Sandra, are you still there?
Ian, do you?
Sorry, this is Sandra. I wasn't set up for that. I apologize.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Cam. My question is just wanting to know what makes you the best leader at this point for the Green Party versus Sonia and Kim. Why do you think you would make a better leader at this point? Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for that question. So what I bring to the party and what I bring to this leadership contest, what this leadership run that is unique, is my experience over 3 decades in bringing people together to create these solutions. Now that is something that, I haven't been an elected official before, but I've worked out solutions with other people that are the solutions that we need to have going forward. And it's not just the outcome, it's not just the solution itself, it's that process of bringing people together and having dialogue and coming up with the answers. So, for 30 years I've been doing that, and feel, with the different roles that I've played in the past, of course, I feel comfortable talking to the cross section of British Columbians, from people in the forestry sector to people in the legal community to people in different geographic parts of the province, to talking to the environmental community, talking to the government officials at all different levels. I was a consultant for a long time with municipal governments, writing a book about municipal issues at the moment related to nature, and fully understand the challenges that all different British Columbians face. So what I bring is the ability to bring people together and have these conversations. The other thing is my strong understanding of the economy. As a trained accountant, I've worked as a financial consultant in different situations before, written business plans, been an entrepreneur, started businesses, and recognize the role that the private sector plays when it's focused on environmental solutions. When it's focused on doing the right thing, amazing things can actually be done. And of course, I offer these things as part of a team, as part of someone who's committed to building that strong slate of candidates and bringing people together and having these conversations. So that's what I would offer. And as far as the details of the ideas, I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks in the campaign when we can discuss these with everybody in British Columbia.
All right, great. Thanks so much. I think our next question is from Paul, and that question is, Mark, do we want to put a spotlight on Paul? Oh, there we go. Perfect.
There's Paul. Hi, Paul.
Okay. Hi, folks.
Outer space. Welcome.
Yes.
Hi, Paul.
To get votes, a political party has to clearly distinguish itself from other parties. I mean clearly distinguish, right? There has to be something you have that the other guys don't, either in quality or in quantity. But to many folks, and it's been raised here before, Green Party's just a bit of green on top of NDP policies. I mean, we talked already today on justice issues, Indigenous, racism, diversity, and so on, all of which I think are wonderful policies, but everybody in this call is living under the quaint conceit that voters actually read your policies, which they don't. Let's just be honest about that. So my question is, how do you distinguish the Green Party very clearly from other parties? Simple, straightforward, strong way to get more votes than in the last election.
Well, that's another great question, and I guess I'd push back a little bit on the policy part, because maybe it's a communications issue in the way that we talk about the issues, but the content of what a political party does is important to people. It's important to people because it means something in their day-to-day lives, and it means something in their future, in their children's future, and the future of their communities. So I would hope that we're able to present ideas that aren't onerous for people to spend time reading or digesting or complicate it, but show that the Green Party really is the only one that understands the reality of what's going on in this world. We can't go back to the fossil fuel industries, to the resource extraction, to the depletion of natural resources, and a boom and bust economy of the past to get a few jobs for some people just for the short period of time. And we can't ignore what the planet is telling us repeatedly in these important warning signals. So instead, the Green Party is the only one that recognizes the opportunities in leaping forward into the future to a zero carbon economy, and to be at the forefront of that and to take it seriously. And the same goes for the issues that we were talking about around equity, around reconciliation, and around protecting the future for our children. So these may be issues that we have to communicate a little better, but that's why we're different, and that's why the Green Party is the one that's going to be the future of the political spectrum in this province, as I mentioned earlier.
I appreciate that, because often in conversations I have with folks, I mean, I view climate change as the, you know, it's the one issue where the Green Party is willing to do more, move faster, move harder than others, and that's why I'm in it. But I've sit on a lot of calls where people are all over the, you know, the trying to prove that we're not a one issue party. Well, damn it, we own the biggest issue that so many people care about. We have to talk about it.
And that issue, of course, isn't just about the planet. It's about our relationship with each other. It's about the economy. It's about the jobs for our children. It's about our health, as we're seeing repeatedly. It's about our relationship with Indigenous people. You know, these things are not siloed. They aren't separate issues. These things are connected to each other. And you know, you're right. The Green Party maybe owns the climate change file, but it's a file that is connected to all other areas of what life is like in British Columbia and what the future needs to be in this province. So we're also the only party, I would submit, that connects these issues and understands them in a really meaningful way.
Fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much for that. Turning to another question in the chat from Megan, who asked, the BC NDP have consulted on forestry issues ad nauseum. Meanwhile, BC Timber Sales is busily clear-cutting in the name of old growth, in the name of the BC taxpayer. How would you approach the role/function of the BC Timber Sales? I would just say it's a similar question also coming from Daniela from the Coutons.
Right, so BC Timber Sales was established in response to the softwood lumber agreement to create a market price for timber, because there's so many subsidies that this government has given to large timber companies. And it's just it's one example of this huge problem with the way forests have been managed in this province. Rachel Holt and her colleagues recently came out with an excellent report that explains the status of old growth in this province. And the province has essentially, the province has been misrepresenting the amount of old growth because they count the trees that will never get big. But if you look at the trees that would get big, the commercially valuable old growth, there's a tiny, tiny fraction left of what there originally was. There's a minuscule bit. And even, you know, 30 years ago when I started working on and thinking about forestry issues in this province, there was a lot more than there was today, but we've closed the door by continually doing the wrong thing. So at this point, we need to stop cutting that old growth and instead take the second growth that is there, apply ecoforestry, change the way communities and individuals are involved in that, and that's what I mean about shared ownership and community ownership of resources. Ensure that ecoforestry is done so we manage the forest properly for the future, and then add as much value as we can to the bit of woods, to the woods that's available, not the burning little pieces of wood to send overseas, but instead creating, for example, engineered wood products. We have building codes in the country that are embracing taller timber construction, so taller buildings that are made from engineered wood products. Why isn't British Columbia leading the world in taking that second growth timber and making it into really valuable engineered wood products for these new building codes and for the future of construction? That's what we should be doing. And that kind of operation, run by Indigenous people, cooperatively owned in communities, is going to create sustainable jobs for the future. It supports a way to deal with the forests or manage forests that doesn't compromise ecosystem health and allows us to start restoring things and protects the tiny bit of old growth that is there. So that's what we need to be doing in the forests.
Thank you, Cam. So a question from George in the chat. The BC Liberals and the BC NDP have been leaving our BC parks out dry and continually reducing funding. Where do you believe Green Party policy should be in regards to funding both recreation and conservation in BC?
Right. So parks are a huge part of the equation on how we restore nature, and there needs to be appropriate funding for there. It supports tourism. It supports protection of those parks, but real protection of those parks, not a green area on a map where we have resource extraction in the middle of the park. These are real protected areas where we can start restoring ecosystems and so on. But parks are only part of the solution. You know, there has to be the area outside of the parks that's protected properly, and that's what I mean by ecoforestry. So the area outside the boundary of a park doesn't just become a clear cut; it's connected to that, and so it has to be managed in such a way that there's healthy forest there too. And in urban areas, there's and this is the focus of the book that I've mentioned earlier, this idea of restoring nature in urban areas so that people have access to it. And I'm not just talking about green space in an urban area, but real ecosystem health in urban areas for a diversity of species and for the ecosystems that used to be here. You know, one thing about COVID that's been very interesting, as we've all seen, is bars and restaurants spreading out into streets. Well, those streets could also be green streets. They could be streets where nature is restored, so people have space to walk and to ride their bikes, so that water filters into the ground as it naturally would, instead of into the decaying pipes and infrastructure that we can't afford to repair and fix. And those are places where patios can then expand out into the street, which makes a better community for everybody.
Thanks, Cam. And with that, I think Mark's going to put the spotlight on James Askew.
James, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, hi there.
Hi, James.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, obviously to get some real support in the province, getting some of the liberal votes, or at least the small L liberals, would be really important. So, because a lot of people kind of seem to go back and forth a little bit between Greens and Liberals during different elections. Do you have a plan in terms of how to do that?
Well, so attracting people that would otherwise probably not feel they have a home in this province. You know, the soft L, so small L liberals who might vote for the Liberals federally don't really have a home in this province. And sure, there's a huge opportunity there for the Green Party. There's a huge opportunity on the other side as well, I think, for people who are unsatisfied with the NDP, with Site C and LNG and cutting old growth and so on, who find, so there's quite a large territory, I think, there. And to answer your question, James, the way to attract anybody who might be voting in this next election to the Green Party is to show, first of all, the things we've been talking about, that the Green Party is serious about these things, about leaping forward and leading the world in this just transition to a zero carbon future, about ensuring equity for everybody, but having a plan to do it and having a plan that helps all of us contribute, so that entrepreneurs are supported, Indigenous people are supported, and the business community as well feels that there's a commitment here to making sure that plants are built when they want to do innovation in British Columbia instead of going somewhere else. And I think that would attract people over quite a broad spectrum, including the folks that you're talking about.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, James. So Megan in the chat asked, sorry, I'm dealing with a puppy here. What's your position on ocean-based fish farms?
So, well, sorry about your puppy. Ocean-based fish farms should not happen at all. These open net, they've been a disaster, and we can see lots of evidence for that for a long time. The work of Alexandra Morton and others have shown clearly how terrible that whole industry is. The alternative, of course, is a closed pen system on land. That would help protect the marine ecosystems and allow some creative work there with in particular Indigenous entrepreneurs that want to offer that solution. So my position would be to phase them out to as soon as possible, and then to have these closed containment land-based systems instead.
Thanks, Cam. Mark, could we maybe train the spotlight on David Hunter, who I think you said has got a question?
Go ahead, David.
Yep. Okay. I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, my name is Dave Hunter. I've been a supporter of the Green Party since 1983, when Adrian first got the ball rolling for us all. Other parties focus their policies on the next election. I'm really proud that the BC Green Party focuses its policies on the next generation. One of the frustrations I've had for the last 30 plus years, I'm old by the way, is I our failure to attract younger people, and by younger I mean under age 40, to actually show up and vote. When you look at who's protesting and shows up at marches and things, it's younger people. And yet I hear from many of them that if I can vote from my phone, you got me. Otherwise, I'm too busy. So what's your position on online voting? We all do our banking online, so I think the security thing is a bogus issue. What can we do to attract younger voters to who actually mostly support us to actually show up and vote? Because
Right.
we won't elect you from just the green bubble.
Well, thanks, David. Those are good comments. I just to preface it a bit, I remember going to the climate march last September with my daughter here in Vancouver at one of the climate marches, and being everywhere I looked, I could turn 360 degrees, and almost everybody I saw would be under the age of 25, and I found it incredibly inspiring. I mean, the march itself was enormous, but the composition of the march was, as you said, it was organized by young people. It was predominantly populated by young people, and the energy was fantastic. The energy was great. Nothing against people who aren't young anymore, but there's including me. But there's great energy there from that. So how do we attract those people? Well, in my campaign here, the team consists significantly of young people who have brought an enormous, including Anna, who's done a great job tonight, and bringing all this energy and creativity to it, and a lot of additional ways of reaching people through social media that they're more comfortable with than I must admit I am. And this is great. This is part of the transformation, I think, of the leadership of the party and of the future of the party. How do we attract them to vote? Maybe online voting is the way to go. I'd have to look into more details of how that would work. But your underlying point is that we need to attract everybody so that they can vote and participate in democracy. And part of that is the mechanisms of voting. Part of it, though, is encouraging people to play roles at every stage in their life in the political process. And I think the Green Party is really at the forefront of that as well in terms of participatory democracy and ensuring that everybody has a voice. And that democracy isn't just about the ballot box once every number of years. Democracy is really about having a voice and participating and in the many ways that are possible, whether it's the marches that we talked about before, whether it's the political campaigns such as this, whether it's being involved in letter writing and education and engagement with elected officials, whether it's involved in the local riding association, whether it's involved just as in civil society generally. And I would really encourage everybody of all ages, but in particular young people, to get involved in whatever way possible, because once again, we bring everybody together. That's how we create answers.
Yeah, my concern is we've tried doing this for the last 20 plus years and nothing we've tried so far has worked. So how do we get these people from the 100,000 showing up at a rally to voting? Like, we're still missing something to attract, to make it easy for them to participate.
Well,
And just lecturing and telling them doesn't get the job done. We need something new. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I would do here, I think, is talk to the young people on my campaign team and the people I know and ask them these questions, because I can't presume to know what it is was the barrier, between that march and their involvement then and getting to the ballot box. But I would, I guess, really try and put together opportunities for that to happen, and then have them tell me and tell you and tell others as to how we can solve that problem, because you've raised a really important issue, David.
Good. Thank you.
As a resident, somewhat young person myself, I think you're already doing that, Cam. So Ian really kindly reiterated his question, and I think, Mark, you could train the spotlight on him.
Happy to. Ian, go ahead and turn your video on for me. I'm going to send you a command there and unmute. Come and join us. Here he comes.
Hello, Cam.
Hi, Ian.
Oh,
Ian.
how are you?
Hi, I know you. Nice to see you. You've grown a beard.
I've grown a beard. I've lost my long hair. So, a couple of questions for you. First, fast one. How long have you been involved with the Green Party in BC?
So I'm new to, obviously this is the first time I've run for office for the Green Party. I've knocked on doors in previous elections, the last federal election. I live in East Vancouver, and so Bridget Burns is the federal candidate here, and I help knock on doors for her. I'm new to the party, but my work has been in parallel. For 30 years I've been working on issues that are core to what the Green Party's been trying to advance in the political arena. And so I hope that my experience that I've gathered doing that work for 30 years really equips me well to contribute in this way. And as always, I'm just trying to find ways that I could be most effective and contribute the most as possible.
Absolutely. No, working with you, the Canada Green Building Council showed me that you really do have that talent of bringing people together to work on issues, real solutions. The other question I have is about the EDAs, the BC Green Party EDAs. I mean, right now, I think we're pretty unspottily developed on the ground in terms of boots on the ground. What I'd like to know is, how would you empower the EDAs to actually work between elections, with local allies on local issues, so that we actually progress where we can?
Right. So that's a good question, Ian. It comes back, to what David was saying about kind of involving people generally. And, the riding associations have a really important role of bringing people together early on, keeping the conversation going between elections. We get people who are going to be running for as a candidate. There's a role, I believe, for those people to play on an ongoing basis, not just to show up for the one election, put their name up there and then see what happens, but to participate on an ongoing basis with everybody else in the party. So I would want to encourage that. And my role as leader, of course, would be to go around and work with the riding associations to find the best candidates, but also to work to improve their infrastructure, improve their reach in the community, to spend time doing things in that community that strengthens the role of the riding associations. Because, as I said, elections aren't really just one-time events and then there's nothing to do for a number of years. It's an ongoing process of building teams and keeping people engaged.
Thanks, Cam. So we're coming to the top of the hour, but we're going to ask a few more questions because we've got a really a good number of keen people in the chat here. So the first one I want to ask is from Swell. Would you be in support of incentives for private electricity producers for solar, hydro, wind, geothermal, and the reinstallation of a proper BC Hydro net metering program?
Yeah. So now Ian, who's just on the call, knows more about net metering than I do. But yeah, so I would absolutely. And so the idea of having simply massive projects as the only way to generate electricity isn't the future. There can be ways. I would really want to support people doing their own independent process to independent power project, whether it's on the solar project, power on the roof of their house, or any other sort of program that can then fit into the grid and have net metering. I was working as a lawyer, spending some time dealing with the Kitimat smelter, and the excess power that's produced there is then sold back to British Columbia at a price higher than what BC Hydro then sells it for. So why do we have these situations? We should have situations that are encouraging people to have a distributed grid and an opportunity for net metering and an opportunity for to produce power in a number of different locations, especially when, of course, that's going to be renewable power.
Great, thanks, Cam. Mark tells me that Glenn is raising her hand to be spotlighted.
Come and join us, Glenn.
Hi there. The first question is, how important do you think it is for the leader to be in the House? Do you regard it as essential or not? And then leading on from that, if you were elected and the balance of seats was much as it is now, with the Greens having a relatively small number of seats, but holding the balance of power, how would your in-house tactics differ from, if at all, from the way they have been recently under the two present members and prior to that, Andrew Weaver? How would it differ?
Great, Glenn. Well, thank you for those two questions. So to answer your first question, sure, it's important to have a leader who has a seat, and we could have an election quite soon. if I was elected leader, the first task would be to put together the team of candidates working with the riding associations around the province and put forward the best slate of candidates that we can for the next election. That could happen fairly soon, as we've sort of been hearing a little bit. And then, of course, as I would run in a riding, as I discussed earlier, hopefully in Metro Vancouver, and have that seat. And, that's a process that would unfold and then be leader with a seat in the House. And to your second question, as I said earlier, the CASA agreement was the right thing to do at that time under those circumstances. You're asking if there's similar circumstances, would we do something like that again? I think we'd have to evaluate the specifics of the situation and what was learned from CASA that was signed last time. And as I said earlier too, I would really hope that what's going to happen is, with the strong candidates that we've talked about, with the momentum, with the timing right, where there's a large swath of people in the province that don't really have a home, and the importance of innovation and leaping ahead into a zero carbon future, we will have more power. And this party, I firmly believe, is the future. This is the party that's growing, that's expanding. We've had amazing success in the past, getting to the point that where we are now, and it's getting better, it's growing. And so we won't be in a situation where we're weaker. We'll be in a situation where we're stronger and we have more seats, and we're leading towards the question asked earlier about whether we form government, and that might take a couple cycles, but we're on our way. And then we'll each time, I think, after the election, we'll make decisions about what arrangements make most sense.
Alrighty, thanks, Cam. Megan from Whistler says, what is your message to someone who's curious about the Green Party but thinks it's a waste of time as a fringe party?
Call me. Call me, Megan, and we'll talk about it, because this party is no longer the party that, the Green Party has never been a party that compromises. The Green Party is now being recognized as the party that is the only one that's recognizing the facts of our current global situation and has the answers going forward. It's certainly not a fringe party, and I would love to hear why you think it might have been or might be now, but that is not the answer. That going forward in the future, the answer is to join in with the Green Party, because we're getting stronger.
All right, thanks so much, Cam. I think we'll pull it to a close for now. Have written down some other people's, we have a pile of more questions that came in at the end, so that's really great. We're gonna mark down all those names and then make sure that you get back to everyone personally, and I'm sure if anybody wanted to have a phone call with you, I'm sure you'd be really up for that.
I would absolutely love to hear from anybody, and thank you, Anna, for a great job tonight.
Thank you, Mark, for hosting us, and thanks to everybody who showed up. We really appreciate your time.